Hello, my name is Becker. We are standing here in our wine library, which represents to me a lot of the change for us and for the Texas wine industry for many years. My family started this winery in '92. As I always say, it was a joint project with my mother and my father after my mother had recovered from breast cancer, trying to do something together. And so when I was little, we began driving around and looking at properties out in the hill country, just so my parents could have a place, something to work at on the weekends. And eventually it came with the current property that we're on, which is about 320 acres. And it was a wonderful experience. Every weekend I was out here with Mom and Dad. My mother would literally drive a tractor as we cleared the land and push brush together that my father and I would then burn. And we fixed up the old house, and I thought that we had plenty to do out here until one spring break. My mother picked me up from school. I was in maybe the 6th or 7th grade. It was 1992, and she informed me that this spring break we would be planting grapes, which was somewhat of a shock to me, knowing that we were in Texas, having no idea that we were planting grapes. And so in '92, my brother, one of my brother's friends from college, myself, and my mother and I came out to plant grapes. And I remember the first day, it was my mother and me and our then general manager. And we were supposed to get there, and we were supposed to have about 5 or 10 guys there to help us plant grapes. And none of them showed up. So it was just me, my mother, and our general manager. And we planted all day. And planting involves, just to begin with, crawling around on your hands and knees. Then you throw into the fact that it's Texas, it's March, the weather's unpredictable, so it's raining what feels like daggers. It's about 20 to 30 degrees outside, and here my mother and I are crawling around our hands and knees, getting covered in this heavy Texas clay. I feel like we crawled miles that day planting some of our very first grapes. And there's a story that we always joke about that my father picked us up at the end of the day. He's a practicing physician in San Antonio. He had the heater blaring, and he immediately told us that we had been planning incorrectly all day after watching us for a few minutes. And this is one of those moments in which my mother just sort of stared at it, and the point was made. But from this onward, the winery became my summer and spring break job for high school, for college. And I think what I always remember about those summers working here were that you learn so much on the job, and that it is very, very hard work, working in the cellars, working in the fields, but you learn so much. It's like taking a course in biochemistry while at the same time working your tail off in the summers. And so then I went to medical school, and I trained in internal medicine and endocrinology at Yale and UCSF. And in 2010, I had completed my training, and I came back, and I started joining my father and mother every Saturday out here for our business meetings. And so it was very eye-opening for me to have been on one side of things, as working in the fields, working in the cellars, now being the other side of the operation, overseeing, looking at the big picture, getting to see what what goes into making our wine. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned even before then is that for us, we have always wanted to have the best wine that you could possibly imagine as a consumer at whatever price point. So early on, we started off with our Iconoclast. And our Iconoclast wines, we always wanted people to get more out of the glass, get more out of the palate than what they were expecting to pay for. And that has carried to all tiers of our wine. And so when I look back at our growth, early on, I think probably one of the best wines that we made was our 1997 Estate Cabernet. And at that point, that's when I remember my father and my mother both realized that we could really make great wine in Texas. And so then within the next few years, our winery has gone from a place of making 1,500 cases a year to a place where we make well over 100,000 cases, where we harvest and process a quarter to a third of all the grapes in Texas, where we have become the premium brand, the premium wine brand in Texas. And I think that comes from a close partnership between my family, including our winemakers, my father, my brother, our winemaker John Leahy, our team out here, in conjunction with what I think to be the greatest distributor, which is Republic National Distributing Company. And with that, I think we have created the great premium Texas wine and the great premium Texas wine brand. And for that, I have to say that I'm very thankful. Beginning in 2012 is when John Leahy joined us. And I have to say, I think that John Leahy is probably the best winemaker that Texas has ever had. What he's been able to do with our barrel program, what he's been able to do with trying out different varieties. We've gone to a point where we've always made Bordeaux varietals, and when we originally started, we had this idea that we thought that this part of Texas was like the southern Rhone, and so we were the first to plant Viognier. Now we have some of the most incredible grape growers in Texas that they were out growing all kinds of varieties, including these single vineyard varietals that John has helped us make, the Counoise, the Carignan, the Cinsault, 2 award-winning wines. In fact, in about 2015 or 2016, in the San Francisco National Wine Competition, we took home 4 double gold-winning wines that John had made, which is unheard of. And so if you don't know, to win a double gold requires you to have a 64-judge panel give all of your wines a gold medal in all 3 rounds of tasting. And so we had our 2014 Raven, we had our 2 single vineyard Cabernets, 2015 Wilmot Cabernet, our 2015 Canada Cabernet, and our 2015 Reserve Merlot that's in the marketplace. And so again, it feels like we've gone from a place of our roots, of just trying to make this work in Texas, to a place where we are making world-class wines. And I think if you look at what we're trying to do in the marketplace, if you look at what we're trying to do in restaurants, what we're trying to do is we're in a place where we want to be like Washington or Oregon or California, where when you go into a restaurant, you have the waiters, you have the sommelier fighting you to buy wines from their state. And we want to make wines, we want to make premium wines for these restaurants, that when you go into a restaurant, we want the wait staff to be fighting you to buy a Texas wine. And that's what we're trying to do with a lot of our premium wine programs. And for instance, with the restaurants, we're also trying to do things, promote by the glass, which we sell a number of kegs of some of our premium white wines and our red wines. And so with all of that, our goal is not just to be the best wine in Texas, our goal is to be the best wine in the world. And I think if I look at our future growth, my mother passed away a year ago. And my mother and father both had an incredible vision about this place. I always feel like my father had all the imagination. My mother had an incredible palate, incredible business sense. My mother had been an incredible French chef. And I think that's what drove a lot of our interest in this wine industry, was that my mother and father, when I was growing up, loved to pair great food and great French food and great French wine. And so that influenced me early on, sitting into my parents' dinner parties. And so when I think about our future, I feel, the goal is, and I always say this, that, our winery is a combination of my father's imagination and my mother's incredible grace. And I think that we want to continue that as the future going forward. We want, when people come into our winery, as my mother always intended, we want people to feel like this is their winery, that we are your winemaking family, we're making your wine. We want you to know our grape growers. We want you to know John Leahy, who's producing our wine. And so we hope that we can continue that vision as the future goes forward. And I think that for Texas, for the Texas wine industry, between us and Republic, I think that it's going to be a continued success story for wine in our state.